Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Mirikitani with Matt Chat. Today I am joined by the King of the Cage title holder at 135, 145, 155, and 160 pounds, Juan Archuleta. Juan, welcome to the show.
Hey, Dave. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
No worries, man. Happy to have you on. Your story's an interesting one. I think a lot of people don't know it. And that's what we like to do here on the show is give people an alternate view of things. So, we're going to probably end up going to the end and telling everybody what you're doing now, but I always like to start at the beginning and just ask you, how did you get started in wrestling?
Yeah, absolutely. Growing up, I have 5 older brothers, who wrestled, and my dad wrestled as well. Being a high school athlete, he did multiple sports, and the last sport he did was wrestling. And when he had all these boys, he wanted to, how to get all their energy out of them, so he took them into the wrestling room and at Victorville High School, where Dan Henderson was from, and, started a kids club called the California Jets. And, we had a lot of good wrestlers coming out of our kids club, and, that being some of my brothers and myself. And, so I started wrestling before I could even walk. And throughout that time of growing up wrestling, my dad had, John Azevedo had started coaching at Calvary Chapel, and we had made the move to Orange County, and my brothers would wrestle out of Calvary Chapel. And, my dad kind of pulled the reins out on me and, made me want to wrestle instead of forcing me to wrestle. But, growing up, watching my brothers wrestle and, just traveling our whole lives and being at wrestling tournaments, I wanted nothing more than to wrestle. So I put the time in, and, I would show up to practices, without my parents knowing, and, just try to get as best as I can, being under the tutelage of John Azevedo. And, then my dad really started, upping the ante and being able to take me to different places throughout, my later years in elementary and the beginning of junior high.
Yeah, it's an interesting story with, usually guys that are the youngest brother are, a lot of times the studs because, they took a lot of beatings as kids. So,
yeah.
I mean, that's probably a universal truth for the most part. Yeah. So, you mentioned Coach Azevedo. Who were some of the other guys that were really instrumental in your career at the high school level?
Oh, man, he had a lot of great wrestlers coming out of there, Shane and Dane Valdez, Joey Calavita, Ty Wilcox, just a lot of his wrestlers being around that atmosphere was huge for me, because they were all, 5 to 8 years older than I was. So I looked up to them a lot, and they would beat me up a lot, and I would come in and watch wrestling practice, and I'd be able to jump on the mat and, get beat up by these guys. And, I came from, Victorville, where Dan Henderson, wrestled at, and Blair Green, and we had a Victorville won California State tournament here. And so we had great wrestlers growing up around us. And, I was always inspired by guys like that to be able to take my wrestling to the next level as well.
Yeah, I think those are the guys that, I've talked to a lot of guys, and, somebody has to go first, right? Like somebody has to be great first, but once you're around greatness and once it's local, right? Like, I think like if you're at Ohio State and Kyle Snyder's in your room, you're like, okay, not that he doesn't work, amazingly hard, but he's a human being, right? Like, he puts his shoes on one at a time. And so when you can get around guys like that, and especially the younger you are in life, that's so great because it helps guys really, the goals become much more tangible. So,
yeah, absolutely.
So I know you went to college at Purdue, and, I know a little bit about your career, but tell me a little bit about your career there and what were some of the skills that you learned there that eventually, helped you get ready for MMA.
Yeah, being at Purdue, it was just, my whole life growing up around guys like Mark Munoz and, Ty Wilcox, Joe Calavita, guys I went to had some great accomplishments, on the mat. They've always told me, like, oh, your first year you're going to get beat up. You probably won't get a takedown depending how tough the room is. So going into college, I had that mindset of I wasn't going to be in a ragdoll. I wanted to go in there, wrestle with the best guys that were in the room and, take it to them right away. And so going in there with that mindset, being prepared, it definitely helped me. Guys like Chris Fleeger, Jake Pataxel, those guys were in my weight class, and being able to wrestle with those guys every day got me to where, my wrestling just took off, and I was able to compete with the best guys in the country, barely losing to guys like Reese Humphrey in overtime, or beating guys like, that were top 10 in the country, Alex Crum at the time, and, just guys that I was always in the top 20. Those guys got me ready to be able to compete with the best in the country. My time at Purdue, had the best riders. Coach Fleeger and Jake Pataxel were, because that's where being from California, I had good, stand up, my takedowns were just as good as, the best in the country, but my ground, getting out top bottom wrestling was, kind of lacked. And once I got there, Jake Pataxel put he would get your wrist, and there was no getting out. Same thing with Fleeger. He'd get those bar arms and those halves, and they'll start cranking on you, and basically almost rip your shoulder off. So I learned every day how to escape from those guys, and never gave up too much riding time or anything in my career.
We had Jake on the show, last fall, and he's a really cerebral dude. He looks at the sport a little bit differently. But he was obviously known for that top game. And I think, I think a lot of people, understand that like Greco is a really good style for fighting because the stance is more upright, and, you learn from there. But I think people maybe don't quite understand how good folk style is if you rode. I mean, if you were just a takedown, let him up guy, it's a little different because, riding or mat control in fighting is so important. So I would imagine that a lot of the lessons you learn from those guys, you can actually, you're probably still applying to what you're doing now.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like the wrist ride, being able to go into spiral riding and keeping the guy on the hip and riding the hips. Mainly for me is a wrist ride. I mean, guys, they're like, oh, he's just gonna wrestle me or hold me down. It's just like, I'm not gonna just hold you down. I'm gonna beat you. I'm gonna send some elbows and stuff. Once I control those wrists and control, like you said, it's if you were able to be a rider in college, it transitions so well into grappling because you could dictate where they're going, and being able to wrestle with Jake Pataxel and Chris Fleeger. I utilize a lot of what they did, to me, to these guys I'm wrestling or fighting now. Just being able to control, frustrate them, wear them down, and they pretty much just give up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you see that in wrestling too, when people are getting ridden, like when Ryan Lane wrestled Derek Moore in the finals, it was pretty much like, oh man, whatever. Right? Derek Morrison was turning him, and Ryan couldn't get out, and it was over from there.
Yeah, turning's a different game because it's almost like, it's nothing, and then the dam breaks, and then all of a sudden you're getting turns left and right. I think it's a physical break, but it's also a mental break, right? Like, this guy gets on top of me, and I'm going to fight you for a minute or 2 minutes, and then, man, this dude just keeps hammering away at my wrist, and then, then you go over. So, there's so it sounds like obviously you got a great, really not knowing it was going to be the next path in your career, but great training for fighting from those guys. So when you left Purdue, what was the path that took you to MMA?
Well, man, it was after my senior year, I got a call when I was training for, some freestyle. I wanted to try to make the world team, but I got a call from Gray Maynard's manager, Randall, and asked if I could come down and do some wrestling with Gray because he was getting ready for a title fight against Frankie Edgar. So they needed someone that moved a lot and, fast. And so I went out there for his camp, and I told him I don't know how to box or throw punches, but I'll do the best I can. And so I got creamed a couple of times, couple of uppercuts that sent right to my jaw that kind of woke me up. And I just put me on my butt. I was like, oh man, but I loved it, because I would there was times I got takedowns, and I was like, okay, sweet, and just rode them out. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was crab riding, spiral riding, wrist control, making a person have to work to get up. They liked it. So I felt like I got confident in what I was doing. Started educating myself more about the sport and realizing that a lot of great wrestlers, not even great wrestlers, just good wrestlers, were doing really well in MMA. And so after that, I went back and did some more wrestling, and then I moved back from Purdue to home, and I kind of took a back seat because I had my son, and I just started working. Wanted to start working and provide for my family, and so kind of just spent the day-to-day grind of wanting to provide for my family. And then I told my wife that I wanted to start coaching or competing again. And so she said about time, and I started coaching, and then watching guys like Zahid Valencia and Anthony Valencia and Caleb. I just got the drive and the energy to want to start doing my own thing. And, my wife gave me the blessing to start fighting. And so, and that took on a whole new realm of training and, getting prepared for actual contact sport.
Yeah, I think, we have obviously people that listen to this podcast are people that love wrestling. And, I coach fighters. And basically it's three different sports in one, right? It's wrestling, it's jiu-jitsu, and then, some form of Muay Thai or kickboxing, depending, striking, big picture. And to me, most wrestlers, if you're a good wrestler, jiu-jitsu, at least basic jiu-jitsu, is fairly easy to pick up, especially submission defense, if you're good at holding base and things like that. And striking, again, I think is, the basics are pretty easy to pick up. I think wrestling is so hard to pick up because so much of what you do as a wrestler is just feel. Like, I leaned this way 5% because I knew you were going to try to sweep or butterfly guard me or, whatever the case may be. Yeah. And, so do you see that where, like, when you first started doing jiu-jitsu, going to grappling, submission grappling classes, whatever term, you guys use, did you feel like, your initial wrestling skills and technique were really helpful in that area?
Oh, yeah. People would get really, really frustrated with the wrestling mentality, especially the Big Ten wrestling mentality of pulling on your head, wearing you down. Once you feel you can gain back position and then start going again. And so wrestling has definitely been a strong foundation for fighting. 18-1 as a pro fighter with 7 world titles. Just taking my time knowing that there's levels to fighting. Just like there is with wrestling, you're not going to get a guy from junior high, just jump right into the college level and win nationals. It's just not going to happen,
Right.
Sometimes you get the high school guys that go in their first year and they, coming out of high school, they win it. But, that's because now the whole evolution of training has changed. You got high school wrestlers that can, practice with college wrestlers or practice with guys that are on the U.S. team. Back when I was in high school, to even wrestle with a college guy was kind of, you heard a handful of guys that did it, but now it just seems like the whole team does it that are great, that you have great wrestlers, or even like 4 or 5 guys that are wrestling with the U.S. team, going to traveling with them and being able to be part of the team at a young age. It's just the whole evolution of wrestling has taken off because of that, And so
it's all the RTC stuff, right? All these guys are,
RTC.
Cross-training and sharing of techniques. And, I think too, I don't know exactly what time you started, but for a while, like jiu-jitsu was this mystery to people, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, wrestlers figure it out. But, you watched a lot of wrestlers in the early stages of like the UFC times, where they'd be beating the hell out of the guy and then extend an arm, and next thing you know, their arm bar is triangled. And, and the one thing that jiu-jitsu mentality, I think is I'm not saying better, but certainly different and an alternative is in wrestling. It's like, I think a lot of people think of it as you push me, I push you, whoever's stronger wins, or you pull, I pull.
Yeah.
Jiu-jitsu mentality is like, look, okay, well, I'm stronger than me and he's going to pull. So I'm just going to go with that leverage and use it against him. And I think, when you start getting your brain to think of the sport in both ways, I think that mentality can actually be really helpful in wrestling, especially if you're coaching guys or, you're competing and you're not that physically strong yet.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because they're so lackadaisical with the grappling. Like, like you said, if he pulls me, I'm just going to go with him, or they're just going to lay on their back. And which is actually for wrestlers' advantage, because you could feel like when they're lazy and then they'll just move, and then you're like, okay, you're going for something. And you just pull out or you just reestablish position.
Yeah.
For when you got a wrestler on you and it's constant pressure, like I'm gonna shove my forearm, like I'm a crossface. I'm gonna be pushing on your head. I'm gonna be doing something to try to stay active, because it's for us. We only have 6 minutes to get a takedown to win the match, or to get a turn, or so we got to constantly stay active. So that's the difference between the grappling and the wrestling mentality. And it plays into the wrestling mentality a lot better. I mean, the only time I've lost, I've gotten put in a triangle, and that's because I was, panicked, got caught in something. I wasn't I hadn't had a lot of grappling experience yet, and I just got caught in a triangle and didn't know, just panicked, threw too many defenses out there, and got choked out.
Yeah, and the interesting about MMA or jiu-jitsu is, there's more kill shots, right? Like there's more ways to catch a guy. Like, if you're beating me by, 9 or 10 points in a wrestling match and all you have to do is not get pinned, that's relatively easy to stop, right? Like even if I'm on top of you, you need to hold base, don't get cross-faced, even take a couple stalling calls, but in fighting, you got to keep moving. And these guys that are really good at submissions, that's all they want to do is help you create momentum and then, fake left, go right, those kind of things. And I think that's the interesting part. Like, I watch a lot of fights. I know you fight and watch a lot of them too. These people that don't really understand, that have never done any of that, they're like, you should just hang out. You're like, no, punched in the face and, all these other things. It's not that simple, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I get ridiculed about that all the time because I'm so offensive. Even like after some of my fights, some of the referees will be like, all you had to do was just, you didn't have to keep attacking. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, this guy's if I sit still and wonder what this guy's going to throw, I'm going to get knocked out. Like, I have to stay offensive because I know I'm leading the dance. There's no way I'm going to stand there and just try to win out a win. I'm going to get my head kicked in.
Yeah.
So.
Well,
if I see the opportunity to take someone down, I'm going to take them down.
Yeah, and in that sport, too, like, the more active you are, the more money you make, and the key to being more active is taking the least amount of damage you can. So, it makes a lot of sense to be offensive and try to finish fights, or at least be in dominant positions, where somebody's slapping your head while they're on their back, really, you can come back and train the next day. So,
yeah, absolutely.
So, one of the things that when I told people I was going to talk to you, that people asked me to talk to you about is that the show Kingdom. And, for people that, love MMA, that show is great because from what I see, it's fairly realistic. It's not, over the top. And I know you and Joe Stevenson were fighting consultants on that. Tell me about that show and maybe like what's a story or two, from behind the scenes there that only guys like you would know about that have really left an impression on you.
Oh, yeah. So when I decided to actually, that kind of helped me quit my job to start training full time. Joe Daddy Stevenson had got a call from Greg Jackson, who's out at New Mexico, runs a great camp out in New Mexico with great fighters, legend coach in MMA.
Yeah, for sure.
He's huge name. So they wanted him to be the MMA consultant, but at the time he couldn't do it because he has so many fighters that are constantly fighting. He said he had a great guy for the job who basically, is he was his mentor for, and that being Joe Stevenson. So Joe at the time, took the gig. He started, he had talked to me and said, hey, if I got an opportunity for you to quit your job, would you take it? And I was like, well, as long as I could get an income coming in.
Sure, right. Yeah. You don't quit blind, like I need a few more details. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So it's just the type of guy to just kind of hint around it and not tell you straight up. So he likes to beat around the bush. It's like, man, Joe, I don't know if I could just quit my job.
I can't go work at In-N-Out Burger, right?
Yeah, because at that time I'm only making like $250 a fight, $250 to show, $250 to win. So and that's $250,
Right,
so it's like, man, I got to fight like once every week to survive,
Yeah, for sure.
But this definitely helped out because it was, making $200 a day, being on the back. I started off being a background at first, and I was able to train every wow.
Your phone's cutting out. So you said I was able to train, and then your phone cut out. Something about Go ahead.
Yeah. So every day we would sit there and train, and Hollywood is like a hurry up and wait.
Yeah, and it's like the airport, right?
Oh yeah, you got to get there 2 hours before and just wait for your flight. So same thing with Hollywood. So I would utilize that time to do some personal training with Joe Stevenson, and so growing into that, I met the writer of the show, and he swore up and down he knew me, and I was like, no, I don't think I've ever met you before, and he's like, no, I know you, and I was like, okay, and the next day he came up to me and he's like, this is how I know you. He was at my first fight, and it was crazy. I had my whole family there, a lot of the wrestlers that I was coaching, the high school kids, and they were just all, loud. And I actually got like flash knocked out the first 10. I caught a knee to my face and like woke up in a single leg and ended up winning out the fight. And like just realizing it was a real fight, you're like, oh man, this is real. You take my head off. So it changes your mind state. You go from wrestling like, okay, cool, but start snapping on the guy and start working on. And instead I took a knee to the face and stuff. I was like, okay, this is real. This is a real fight.
Yeah.
This guy's trying to kill me, So he's like, this is where I know you from, and because it was a good fight. And I fought a guy that was like 16-0 as an amateur, but made his pro debut. And then after he said that, he's like, we would love to keep you on and maybe hire you on as well with Joe Daddy as the co-MMA consultant. And Joe was like, oh, yeah, that's perfect. So whenever I have to go corner my guys, you could just step in. So I stepped in for him, and, we both became the MMA consultants on the show. Nick Jonas, Matt Laria, Jonathan Tucker, Frank Guerrillo. We had some guerrilla fighters there, Natalie Martinez. We got good people. We are good actors. We were training that were dedicated to the sport of MMA. And, so to bring the authenticity in, these guys kind of fully developed and consumed their life into the actor they were. I was in charge of Matt Laria to bring out the wrestling in him, because he was supposedly a Olympic wrestler.
Right.
And, just turned pro fight, or, was UFC champ. He went, so we try to emulate him to fight like George St. Pierre, with good wrestling, good striking, just well-rounded. So that was our job, or my job, to try to portray that. And then, Nick Jonas was the grappler. So Joe Daddy Stevenson who's a great grappler, would grapple with them every day. And, Frank Guerrillo had previous, he actually wrestled, in high school and had done boxing and spent some time at Greg Jackson's camp. So he already had a lot of knowledge of MMA. And then Jonathan Tucker played like a Muay Thai, like Conor McGregor type style of fighter. So it was fun to train these guys, and they actually would go to some of the wrestling tournaments that I was coaching at just to see what it was like for a wrestling tournament, or go to the fights. They go to every one of my fights, and they would try to see what type of lifestyle we were living, so they could, and actors, they fully sell into the character. It's pretty awesome to see, and so they would, that was their homework, was to come watch us, or see how we lived, and just things like that, so they could implement it into their acting. Or they would ask stories for us to tell them stories of our life, and Joe would tell them stories. Joe would tell them stories about fighting, and how he would go party, lose all his money, and then have to go back and fight again to make more money. And so they implemented those stories into the show that made it a reality, you know, almost like a reality where people could relate to.
Yeah, you know, obviously making things as realistic as possible. For the guys that are hardcore, it appeals to them. And then for the guys that aren't, or the people that aren't, they get to go, okay, this is what it's really like. You know, I mean, so that's awesome. So
yeah, like the drug use and like, you know, you start throwing tournaments out there. Like I was like, oh yeah, just say that you placed a couple times at the Midlands in college, or, you know, that you were, you know, hearing like, oh yeah, we dueled Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
You know, and they have those little stories to tell. It makes you like, oh dang, this is almost as real.
Right. Yeah. Those are the little details that make everything feel so much more realistic. You're absolutely right. So, you know, one of the things that's interesting, you know, you and I have had a chance to hang out a little bit socially, but your surroundings of guys like, you mentioned Joe Stevenson a couple times. I know you were just training with DT, David Taylor. And I know you're currently training with guys like TJ Dillashaw and Cub Swanson. What does that do for your mentality to be surrounded by such levels of excellence? And obviously you're excellent too. I don't mean to imply you're not in that level, but what does that help you do in terms of goal setting and mentality of training and things like that?
Clear, you know, of like when you have someone in your hometown that you know is an Olympian or had done big things, it makes your goals that you're setting out more realistic, you know. So it's something that, you know, like I said earlier too, high school guys that are training with guys that are in the U.S. Open right now, or that are on the U.S. team, I mean, and are guys that are national champs and they're in high school and they're training with them, it makes it realistic for them. So for me, being around these guys, being around the best guys I could find that are training partners and turn them into, you know, family, brothers that I could train with and trust, you know, it makes my goal sets that more realistic. You know, I never thought I was going to be able to be the first person in MMA to have 3 titles in 3 different divisions, let alone now I have 4 titles in 4 different weight divisions. You know, it's unheard of in MMA. You know, boxing, you could be a 4-time, 5-time division champ, but MMA, because the weights are so spread out, you don't really see that a lot. And so being around these guys, it sped up my career for technique wise. I started late. I started when I was 27 fighting, and now I'm 30. But now I have, you know, in those 3.5, 4 years that I fought, I have 19 fights, 18 fights under my belt. And now that some of the guys that I train with don't even have that many fights, and they've been fighting longer than I have. So.
Yeah, when I first met you, your schedule of fighting is crazy, man. I mean, you're fighting like every 6 to 8 weeks, and you're bouncing up and down in weight classes, and I definitely want to get into that. So, you know, but one of the things that I think is important, you know, is we talk about, you know, you got 4 belts. I introduced, you know, as basically 133 to 160. And when I first met you, you know, I was with a buddy of mine, Scott Cutbirth, who you know, and we were in Kansas City. It was the weekend of the UFC Demetrius Johnson fight. And he just literally saw you walking, you know, down the street and grabbed you, and we all hung out. And he was the one that kind of told me who, you know, your different weight classes. You certainly didn't brag to me about it, but I'm an old school guy. And what I mean by that is I think, and I'm trying to change my mind about this, but the way I was raised was, look, if you can make 135, you're a 135 pounder, you know? And I think that's a college mentality, right? Like,
absolutely,
you know, coaches recruit you at a weight. And, you know, I remember kids were like, well, you know, I can wrestle up. And I'm like, nah, like, you know, like, no, not really, bro. You know, you know, absolutely. You're probably not going to win that, you know? So, you know, it's very, very interesting. You know, explain to me and the listeners how you are able to be so successful at these multiple weight classes.
Yeah, so when I started training, a guy that my dad went to high school with and who was actually one of my mentors as well growing up, wrestling. His name's Sam Calavita. He wrestled here in Victorville as well. So he has a wrestling mind state. But he actually educated himself in nutrition and in weightlifting. He was actually one of the world's strongest men back in the 90s, those tournaments. And he kind of started having some, carrying that much mass. And if your body's not ready for it, your heart's getting ready to explode. So, you got to kind of change your lifestyle.
Wait, back up. If you put on a lot of mass quickly, you're saying your heart is literally ready to explode?
Yeah, because it's a muscle as well. So if you're taking in a lot of supplements, and say if your body's, your heart's a muscle. So if you're cranking out, a bunch of weights, you get too big too soon, your heart. And say if I was a lighter weight, and say if I'm what I am right now, and I got up to 210 pounds just out of nowhere, just from lifting, probably doing steroids, whatever.
Sure.
My heart, I'll have heart failure. That's why a lot of these weightlifters, they die of heart attacks or strokes because their heart can't handle that much mass to pump that blood out, or it's working too hard, and just I don't know. I'm not a cardiologist or anything. I'm not a heart doctor, so I don't know the true science behind it. But I know that's a lot of people have heart failure, that get too big. A lot of these weight builders and bodybuilders. So, but cause he had symptoms of that. And so he had to change his whole lifestyle. And now he does triathlons and Ironmans. And he started actually finding out, like doing the biohacks of the body, being able to perform without taking, performance enhancing drugs. Cause cyclists and marathon guys, they're huge into, tapping into the body and knowing how to rest and recover your body, as well as pushing your functional threshold power. And so when I came back from Purdue, he's like, hey, let me work with you on your strength conditioning and your meal plan and your diet. And I was like, all right, perfect. So we started doing some experimenting, and I told him I wanted to go 135. That was probably going to be my career choice. And so I started fighting at 135. It was a big cut for me. I wrestled at 141 in college, so the weight cut was pretty, precise.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it was down, like I got down probably to like 5% body fat, probably even 4% of just, shredded. And, but I never skipped a meal. He's a calculus teacher. So everything is mathematically figured out for me. I don't even know the math behind it, let alone the science. He would let me know what I needed to do, training wise. You need to be in this zone, I need you to wake up and get this much of a low base, and I need you to wake up, eat this, make sure, him and my wife, when he dealt with my wife on the nutritional end, on, fats, carbs, and proteins. So she had everything figured out, and my wife's awesome at like knowing which meat to eat, what nutrition value I'll have if I had this type of meal after this practice or before this practice, if I ate the right, nutrients of, instead of eating, say I just wanted a salad before my practice, something to stay light. She'd be like, okay, she'd add extra stuff to give me the protein, the carbs, the fats, and say, okay, this is going to give you energy in order to perform for this practice. And so that way, when I went into practice, I'm never, being like, oh man, I'm just trying to make it through this practice. Once the engines start going, I start going,
Yeah.
So, and I'm more of a fuel efficient athlete now. Now my body's burning the right amount of calories. Instead of saying, okay, I'm gonna eat a cheeseburger, then I'm gonna go to practice. You're obviously gonna have two different performances: eating fast food, then eating something that's prepared the right way, and that's gonna fuel your body.
Right.
So finding out that and knowing how many calories I needed to eat throughout the day to lose weight. And let alone now, if I was wanting to gain weight, I had to eat a certain amount of calories a day with my supplements and, taking them at certain times, which he's the mastermind behind Sam Calavita, the training lab, of finding that out, knowing, okay, these supplements are for when you wake up. These supplements are, after your workout or during your workout. And then this is right before you go to bed. So he figured all this stuff out, basically how to hack my body, and he knows it better than I do now. Like, he tells me, okay, I know when you practice the week of the fight, you're going to lose 10 pounds on Monday. With the water loss and everything. I'm like, hey Sam, I lost. I came in at 148. Now I'm weighing, 138. He's like, all right, perfect. I know exactly what your body's going to give me. Now he could start saying, add creatine, add this, that, because it's not gonna hold anything back because my body's so efficient, and he's gonna know which supplement to put in. That's all. USADA approved, WADA approved. That we don't take anything illegal, and so that's why you see the success that you're seeing with David Taylor. He started working with us as well, and we're being able to biohack the body the right way, the way God made it to be, so you're able to function at a high octane, and you're able to, last with your cardio. You're able to bump up in weight class and still have cardio, because it was tough for myself. Also in David, you've seen some of his matches where when he bumped up, he was gassing out a little bit. He was definitely tired, but that guy was just as tired. But now he was carrying the extra weight, so now it's learning how to condition that extra weight and being able to be as strong as everyone in that weight class. So a lot of training and training modalities we used that helped us be able to perform at that level.
Well, it's certainly interesting. Everything you said is really interesting. And you and I, when I first met you, you told me about some of this, and it was one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show. But, your whole set of stuff, the ability to bump up between 135 to 160 and back down. And I remember you telling me, look, this is why I need 7, 8 weeks, 9, 10 weeks notice for a fight. Like, I'll move up or I'll move down, but I've got to give Sam the time, like you're the car. He's got to put the right gas, put the right gas and oil and everything else in you so that you can perform at the level you want. The David Taylor thing is super interesting because, 2016, he's at the Olympic trials at 74 kilos, 162.8. And, obviously wrestled well, he's in that mix there with those guys. He was at one there, but, now he's a full-blown 86 kilo, 189 pound approximately guy. And he doesn't look small at all for the weight. And, he still is able to perform at a really high level. So, it sounds like, I think everybody that's serious about their sport, like you guys are, probably you don't need to chase them out of In-N-Out Burger and places like that.
Absolutely.
But, I think this is just a different level of education and a different level of commitment, right? Like, this guy's your secret weapon, more or less, right?
Yeah. And it's just getting a game plan together, too. It's just like when I was in college, if I could have utilized this when I was in college and actually had a game plan, because wrestling, we're kind of Neanderthal when it comes to it's like, okay, make the weight. I don't know how you're going to do it, but you're going to do it. If we got to keep you here and throw you in the sauna, we're going to lock that door till you're on weight. I'm not saying that every coach does that, but I'm just giving people a visualization of how Neanderthal we are, or we were, when, especially myself, because I tell my buddy, just lock me in here until I'm on weight. Don't let me out. It's that type of mentality because we really want to make weight. And, some people say, well, why don't you just go up? It's just like, because my better chances, that weight class, cutting the weight and being, somewhat sized up for my weight class. Like being a 41 pounder, I cut weight, but I still wasn't as strong as most of the guys on, like a Jimmy Kennedy or, Kellen Russell. Those guys were still stronger than me. So I was on somewhat of a level playing field with my speed, but, these guys were strong,
Yeah.
So
they're the best in the country, so that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And so now if I knew, and I would, when I was in college, I wouldn't eat the cafeteria food or the, the food that was there at the school. I would still cook my own meals, but, Sam is so educated on what to put in the body. I wish I could go in more detail, but there's already some guys trying to take his information, and kind of being snakes about it, that guys that reached out for him to help. and, you know, they're trying to just steal his ideas without, compensating him for it. So I can't go into too much detail on his plans, but, you know, we know what we're going to put into our body. We know that the supplements we're getting are 100% of purity and not bastardized with the stuff that our body can't break down. Like everything we put into our body, it's going to be utilized. You know, it's definitely going to have efficiency, and our body doesn't need to, you know, kick other stuff out in order to absorb the stuff we were taking in, like the creatine. A lot of people order creatine, but there's so much other junk in it, and it's like, you know, almost like bastardized with other stuff that doesn't need to be in there. So he does his research on finding the purest form of supplements we could get that our body could break down right away. And so, you know, knowing that what I know now, and that's why we're able to blow up so from 45 all the way up to 160 and be able to compete and be just as strong as those guys, because, you know, we're having stuff that's being used right away in our muscles. We're no cycle our supplements, you know, and being able to be efficient with it, and, you know, putting the right nutrients. You know, sometimes, you know, bread's not the best option to put into your diet. So, you know, we eliminate that, and, you know, we start having better performances. Or, you know, say for instance, we're cooking with Teflon pans, and, you know, you know, not knowing, I did a hair dynalysis test on me, and I had high traces of arsenic, and that came from, you know, the way I cook my food. And so finding the right pans to cook my meals in, where I'm eliminating, you know, the use of arsenic getting put into my system, or, you know, heavy tin, or, you know, too much iron, you know, okay, I got to cut back on using iron pans and start using more different metal pans to, you know, balance out my system. You know, it comes to a T all the way. If you want to be the best athlete in the world, you know, it comes down to that 1-2% of what do I need to change in order to give my body that little extra push, that extra 20 seconds to get the takedown, or the extra 10 seconds to defend off the takedown, you know, because you see people hit the wall and they don't know how to function after that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember we were talking that night, and you're telling me about these pans. And I was like, I remember talking to Scott. I'm like, man, I got to get this dude on the show. Like, this is crazy. You know, like,
Yeah.
you know, that level of detail. So,
Yeah.
you know, definitely don't want to try to, you know, I know how highly you think of Sam and what a difference he's made in your life. So don't, you know, want him to be compensated for all the great work he's doing. But I do appreciate, you know, you kind of diving into that, and explaining that to the listeners, because it's high level stuff. So, you know, right now you're in King of the Cage, and obviously your goal, you know, eventually along with, you know, most guys that start fighting is to be in the UFC or Bellator. And recently we saw your friend Aaron Pico take a loss to actually a St. Louis guy, a friend of mine, Zach Freeman. And and obviously kind of in hindsight, maybe his first pro fight at Madison Square Garden against the guy who's really a veteran in the sport, you know, wasn't the best idea. So I know you have a really specific thought process and plan on how to get to the next level. You know, what does the path look like for you?
Yeah, so I took the route. I wanted to fight amateur, except no one's going to fight a Big Ten amateur, a guy coming out of the Big Ten and line up to say, yeah, I'll fight that guy, you know?
Yeah.
Fighting is such like a prima donna sport sometimes, when you're finding opponents, because you got guys that have never have done contact sports before and just said, oh, I saw this on TV, I want to do UFC, instead of saying, oh, I want to do MMA. They literally say, oh, I want to do UFC, and think they're going to get in the big show right away. You know, it's just like, man, it's like being in in junior high, going to high school and saying, oh, I'm going to go wrestle in the NCAA tournament. It's like, no, dude, you got to.
Yeah, no, bro.
You're not even going to. Or someone that comes in the wrestling room and says, oh, yeah, coach, I want to wrestle in the state tournament. You're like, dude, do you know you have to wrestle the season? You have to wrestle league, CIF, Masters, then state. And so, you know, some of these fighters, some people that turn fighters, they're like that. You know, they want to jump in right away to, you know, because some people do have success with it. And, you know, so, but for me, I know there's levels to everything. You know, I can't just play high school ball and say I'm going to go into the NFL, you know. So I took that mindset of like, okay, no one's going to do amateurs, so let me get some more fights pro. And when everyone told me, oh, when you turn 5-0, that's when you want to go into the UFC. So I had that mind state, like, okay, I'm going to go get 5 fights real quick. And then when I lost, it made me realize, like, man, why am I in a rush to try to hurry up and do something that I want to make a career out of? I was like, I'm going to take my time. I'm going to get as much fights as I can and without, build my brand. I want to build a brand that's going to last for a lifetime, and possibly more. And so I started saying, okay, there's going to be levels to this for me. So I want to start building myself up. And so when I took that mind state of it, the fear of losing went away right away. And every fight now I'm like, man, okay, this guy's not better than the guys I wrestled in the Big Ten. These guys aren't better athletes than the guys I wrestled at NCAAs. And just started telling myself that every day, just letting myself know where I was in college and where I was after college, that I am a good athlete. I wrestled in the Big Ten and the NCAA championships. There's no way these guys are better athletes than me. I wrestled my whole life. I've competed against another person my whole life. So that took the fear of fighting and, because before I was like, well, I want to fight a guy that's like this. I want to fight a guy like this. And then when I started telling myself, like, what am I doing? Like, I'm not another one of these fighters, because all these fighters are scared to take the challenge, And so I accepted the challenge, and I started challenging myself to fight bigger guys, and and it just paid dividends so far of going step by step, not looking towards the future, just worrying about now. So right now I got another fight coming up on December 4th. That's a tough guy who also wrestled. His name's Mark Dickman. I believe it was D2 or NAIA.
Mark Dickman wrestled for me.
Oh, did he?
Mark Dickman wrestled for me at Merrimack, was a national runner-up, and then was a national champion at Lindenwood. So that is crazy you guys are fighting each other.
Yeah, I actually just found that out yesterday. So, yeah, that is crazy. So he's training out of and he's a great fighter too. He's fought for a while. I think he's 12-2, 12-3. Great wrestler too. So now I'm up to that next level where I'm able to fight someone that's a wrestler like me, that's a great fighter, and be able to test the waters,
Yeah. Well, that'll be one where I just kind of got to cover my eyes because I'm buddies with both of you guys.
Yeah.
Mark's like my little brothers. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what was crazy was we had him on the show too.
Yeah.
And, since I built up my brand so high now and got stock in my name, people want to fight me in order to get to the next level as well. There's people started asking to now I don't have to go out and look for fights or pay, because basically sometimes the promoter has to pay extra for a wrestler to fight someone. Because say if Nolf came out of college right now and said, I want to fight.
Yeah.
And he was in like a lower and not in a big promotion, and say he went to like somewhere like a regional show.
Yeah.
They would have to pay that guy that guy would ask for instead of getting paid $1,500 and $1,500, like $1,500 to show, $1,500 to win. He would ask for like $4,000 to show and $4,000 to win, because they're like, that's a for sure loss. That guy's an NCAA champ, and so that's what I had trouble with. And now, since there's a price tag on my head by the upper promotions, like, hey, if you beat this guy, it shows us that you're a real fighter, and we'll give you a contract to the UFC or to Bellator or to the professional fight league, whatever it is. So now I built up my brand to where people want to fight me in order to knock me off, so they could take what I've earned, or take my throne, basically.
Sure. And what's crazy is, I'm thinking back on this, we were all able to hang out that one night at Randy Couture's house, and you and Mark were there together with us. So.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, we were there. Huh? Yeah, exactly. I forgot he was there, but
yeah. That was a fun night. So.
Yeah.
Well.
And the cool thing the cool thing with wrestlers as well, when it's fighting, for us, is just like, let's go make some money together. We did this before. We've wrestled against each other and knocked each other out of the NCAA tournament or the Big Ten tournament. Why not go make money together?
Yeah.
And, of course, there's different stakes at line, with getting knocked out or getting chunked out or getting beat, and it's your career. But at the same time, it's an honor to fight, guys like that are, your friends. Everyone looks at it like, well, I trained with you. What the heck? Why do you want to fight me? It's just like, dude, are you kidding me? We trained once. Like,
yeah.
And you asked me to, just so you can say that you don't want to fight me, so you come and train. It's weird, man. MMA, they have a different mentality than wrestlers. That's why wrestlers shine. They don't care. They like step up and we'll fight, and then go for a beer after.
It's interesting. I've run charity events with MMA guys and with wrestlers, the Missouri Border Brawl, and what's interesting is the fighters are always like, well, look, I only want to fight somebody ranked above me, and you have to explain to them that no one would ever fight, because somebody has to be ranked lower. And the funny thing in wrestling is, I ask these kids to wrestle in these events, and they're all like, yeah, and they don't even ask who they're wrestling. They're like, I want to wrestle. I'm going to fight it. I'm going to wrestle a great guy. I'm going to support a great cause. I get some cool swag. I get to be, on track wrestling, things like that. Like the mentality is so different. And those guys that wrestled the transition over to fighting, I think one of the big advantages they have is that mentality. So, for sure.
And I think where a lot of the wrestlers lose it too is they want to be stand-up fighters. Like me, I still go colleges, and I was out in Kentucky with Chris Flieger. Right after the day after my fight, my last fight, I went out to University of Cumberland and got to wrestle with this whole team. Got to get back to my roots. I love to do that. Right before my fight, I'll wrestle for like a week or two to get back to my roots, and then and then right after my fight, I go back and wrestle with, again for another week or two, just so I could keep my roots under me and not lose who I am as a fighter,
For sure. Yeah. Well, look, man, I really appreciate you taking so much time with me today. I know, we've talked about doing this for a while. I appreciate you coming on the show. And,
thanks for having me.
Best of luck to TJ and Cub and David and you. And, I know, I don't know when I'll see you next, but I know for sure at the very least it'll be Las Vegas. We'll have to circle back and make that a tradition, So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was a great time. Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. And thanks to your listeners for tuning in. I really appreciate them and the time you gave me.
No worries. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Juan Archuleta, King of the Cage, champion at 4 different weight classes. This is David Mirikitani with Matt Chat. We'll speak to you all next week.
This show is part of the Matt Talk Podcast Network. For more wrestling podcasts, head over to MattTalkOnline.com.